All right. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to, I believe this is the last session of English history. Congratulations if you're still listening to my lectures. You've made it this far. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of Zoom for not malfunctioning. I'm proud of Google Slides. All right, let's get started with our last session here. There you are. And let's begin from the way beginning. All right, so here's the last session, and welcome back. All right. I left off at the Tudors last time, so we'll pick up. So in general terms, the Tudor era was seen as pretty stable compared to the time before, because the time before it was the Wars of the Roses, where everyone fought and died, fought and died. However, we had a problem where there was the Reformation, where Martin Luther nails his thesis to the walls of the Catholic Church. Protestants and Catholics start to split up. So before they were broken up and sold by Henry VIII, monasteries had been one of the most important parts of social welfare, giving money, look after the poor people, and with Henry VIII making his own church, they went poof. And since monasteries were gone, the state would have to adopt this role, which created the Poor Law of 1601. The monasteries were renewed. They were no longer major educational or economic establishments. They were abolished, and grammar schools were set up in place of monasteries along with printing press, which helped improve literacy in the Tudor era. All right, food and agriculture. So there were some agricultural reforms in the beginning in the 13th century, and there's something called enclosure, where the open field system was changed. And before we had a lot of peasants working on a large piece of land, but nowadays they don't have that much land to work with anymore. And they used to all share a plot of land, but now it's not working because the land was being closed by the Wolfe family for sheep farming or planting things so they can get money. England's food supply was plentiful throughout most of the era. There were no famines, but there were bad harvests. And in different towns, the price of things like flour and like eggs were fixed by law. In more difficult times, the food portions become smaller. Poor people ate differently compared to rich people. The rich people would have sugar and spices and fancy hunting animals and large varieties of meats and proteins and a lot of interesting garden vegetables that they buy from the market vendors. Poor people had a more monotonous diet. They were basically eating the same things daily. You had bread, cheese, milk, and beer with, salt fish, salted meats, and vegetables, and occasionally some fruit. This is the era where potatoes are introduced and become gradually more important to the diets of poor people. And in the lower classes, families without a garden could trade with their neighbors to obtain vegetables and fruits cheaply. All right, 17th century. So in 17th century, England went kind of whack. It was racked by civil war over religious issues. Even though it was generally prosperous, there were a lot of hidden issues. You had the English Civil War, as I said in previous sessions, and it was, as a result, a strict Puritanism was imposed on the country, and there were also divisions forming along the lines of the regular people and the rich people called the gentry, and between the country people and the city people. You refer to it as the world turned upside down. In 1660, there was a restoration, and it turned back to the high church. Public opinion went against the Puritanism because they banned a lot of traditional hobbies like gambling, cockfighting, where you make two roosters fight each other, the theater, you can no longer watch plays, even Christmas celebrations. So Eventually, you have Charles II, who is the son of the Charles I that I said earlier, whose head got chopped off. He was restored to the throne and he brought a relief from the strict period from Cromwell. The theater returned along with a lot of expensive fashions, a lot of jewels, a lot of spices, a lot of commodities. The British Empire grew rapidly after 1600, with a lot of wealth coming back to the country, with expensive luxury items like sugar, coffee, tea, and even slaves. This would be the backbone of the imperial trade. 1 in 9 Englishmen lived in London near the end of the Stuart period. However, plagues were even more deadly in a crowded city. The only remedy was to move to rural areas because there were less people, and so the disease could not spread as easily. An example of this would be Newton. He went back in 1664 and 1666 to escape the Great Plague of London. All right, the last slide of today, we're going to talk about laws. Historians who examine the 500-year period between 13 and 1800s, they have a high level of continuity in their studies. So the laws have remained relatively unchanged in this period. So to explore how crime was, to explain how the people back then defined crime and detected crime, there were a lot of changes in the court system, a lot of central importance of elite attitudes towards the criminals. And a lot happened before the establishment of police force in the 19th century. There was the Black Act of 1723, sponsored by Prime Minister Robert Walpole. This strengthened the criminal code. It specified over 200 capital crimes. A lot of them had intensified punishment. Arson, for example, setting fire to places, was expanded to include a burning or the threat of burning haystacks. The legal rights of the people who were sued were strictly limited. Local villages were punished if they failed to find and prosecute alleged criminals. So, this whole thing about laws is highly subjective, and you might want to take this with a grain of salt because it was back then before all the forensics fancy things came into existence. All right, I believe that will be it for today. Thank you for watching, and please have a good weekend.